All right, what is up everybody? Scott Brio back again with another video. Today's video is kind of a controversial topic of mine. Inserts are better than sends and returns. And that means in the modern mixing environment in a DAW, working with a computer. I wanted to get this opinion out there though, because once I started using this technique, it really made my mixes much better. A little backstory on sends and returns and inserts. Basically back in the day when recording engineers had analog desks and hardware effects, reverbs, delays, compressors, you were sort of limited to how many channels you had and how many hardware effects units that you had. To get around this, what they did was they implemented something called inserts, which was generally a button on your mixing console, and that would send your signal out through an effects rack and then back, kind of like one continuous loop. And so that effect would come in on the track with your volume fader. You also had something called a send and return, which was essentially a similar thing. You had a button on your track that you could press that would send the signal out, similar to an insert, except what it would do is it would go through your effects rack, compressors, reverbs, delays, whatever, and then it would go back to a bus or a group. And that meant that you could send multiple tracks, all with the buttons, to that effects send. And what you could get is you could get all of your drums going through one reverb unit, rather than needing 20 reverb units to put all your drums through. Now, when a send and a return comes back to a group or a bus, all of those sent signals that are going through those effects are being sent to another fader, not the original ones that you're sending from. So what that means is you have this kind of wash of all these sounds going through your reverb or your delay, coming back on a separate fader. It made things really convenient back then because, a lot of times you only had a couple delay units, a couple reverb units. Now, in today's studios, we have, endless processing power, many gigabytes of RAM. We have VSTs that can be copied endlessly on any different track, all at the same time. Now, considering all this power that we have, what I think has changed is that we really don't need sends and returns as much as we did back in the day. Now, that doesn't mean that they're useless, because they're not. They're still very useful for if you want to send all of your drum tracks to a reverb unit and have it come back as a return. That's very useful. But I tend to think that putting all of your effects on any given track now as an insert, which just means putting it on the track in Ableton or Pro Tools or Logic or whatever, that you're going to get a more 3D mix in the end. Because something like a send and return, it creates this kind of mentality where you think, oh gee, well, I'm just gonna, send synthesizer track to the reverb send. And then you might think, oh well, these vocals need some reverb as well. I'll just send that vocal to the reverb send. It doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but what you get with a send and return setup like that is you get this kind of sonic mush of everything sounding the same because you're using one reverb for all of those different sounds. Now, if you put those effects on any given track, it's going to prompt you to think, well, maybe let's put a proverb on the vocals with like a vocal preset, and then we'll tweak that. Oh, maybe the synth track needs a much bigger, more spacey, atmospheric reverb. And the same goes for delays, all sorts of things, whatever you'd want to put on it. But by doing this, you're creating a 3D space for any given track in the mix, rather than them all just sounding kind of similar. So with that said, let's swing over to Ableton, and I'm just going to show you a quick example of what it is I'm talking about. And of course, I am going to exaggerate the effects a bit so that you can really hear what I'm talking about, but try this in your own mixes and see if it doesn't work out. Okay, so here we've got a quick little 8-bar track that I made. We've got a kick drum, some drums, we've got some uplifters, downlifters, we've got a mid bass, kind of piano loop, and some vocals. So let's check that out.
Going back to the old school, way back in the day. Who came from miles around to hear the music play. We're going back.
So not too bad. What I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to flip over here to our mix window. We've got 3 different sends. We've got a reverb, we've got a digital delay, and we have a super send. We're not going to worry about the super send today. We're going to focus on the reverb and the delay. I want to send our hats loop here to the reverb. So I can flip over and just dial up this A here. And what that's going to do is it's going to send to our reverb track. Cool, so now we got some reverb on the percussion track. Now I also want to put some reverb on the vocals. using a send and return, I'm just gonna dial this up and I'm gonna put the vocals into this reverb track as well.
We're going back to the old school. Way back in the day. People came from miles around.
Doesn't sound too bad. And now if I throw a utility on here, I'm just gonna dial this up so you can hear exactly what's going on in this send and return. Cool, we don't need that utility though. Now we're gonna listen to this all together again, and then I'm gonna A and B, I'm gonna cut the video together so that you can hear the both of them together at the end.
We're going back to the old school. Way back in the day. People came from miles around. You hear the music play. We're going back.
But now I'm gonna take off those sends, and what I'm gonna do is I'm going to put a similar effect on both the tracks, but they're slightly different, right? So here is Valhalla Vintage Verb, and I have the drum air preset coming up. Let's hear that. And without it. And now let's go over to our vocals and let's turn on this Valhalla Vintage Reverb. This one has a deep vocal space on it, so let's hear that.
We're going back to the old school. Way back in the day. People came from miles around.
Nice. Now let's hear it all together with the inserts versus the send and returns.
We're going back to the old school. Way back in the day. People came from miles around. You hear the music play. We're going back.
And now I'll cut the two together so that you can hear them back to back.
We're going back to the old school. Way back in the day. People came from miles around. We're going back to the old school. Way back in the day. People came from miles around. You hear the music play. We're going.
So there you go. That is why I think that inserts are better than sends and returns. This effect, it's subtle, right? That's what mixing is. Mixing is subtleties. But I generally do think that if you implement this in your own productions, in your own mixes, you will get much better mix results. And if you don't, come back and tell me here in the comments why it didn't work out for you. But anyway, if this video has been helpful, please give me a like and subscribe. It really helps with the growth of the channel. And if you want to support me, you can click any of the affiliate links in the description below. And you can also go to my website. I have a mixing and mastering company called Dance Diamond Mastering, where I do, mixing and mastering for electronic music, indie rock, techno. So if you need a mastering engineer, I'd love to work on your stuff. You can find me on WhatsApp. That's usually the easiest way. But anyway, thanks again for checking this out. And again, tell me what you think in the comments below. I'm interested to hear. So I'm Scott Brio, and I will see you all on the next one. Peace out.